Hi, everybody. Welcome to the CoStar News Hotels podcast. I'm news editor Sean McCracken here with STR's Jesper Palmqvist. Jesper, how is life on the other side of the planet?
It is windy, but good.
I feel like windy might be underselling it, I guess. Not that not to make light of that news, but I guess that is let's start there. That is kind of the news of the day in the Asia Pacific region, which is what we're here to talk about. Pretty major storm issues in populated areas across
Yeah, that's
China,
true. And I
Hong
mean,
Kong, Taiwan.
yeah,
What?
it's this time of year. It's this time of year, and what people forget is that this comes around every year.
Yeah.
You regardless if you call them cyclones, or for instance, that would hit Fiji and Vanuatu, and big one in 23, or you can go hurricanes or typhoons. They hit all over the world, and there are more of them these days. So
Hmm.
funny that climate seems to have an impact on things. But but so we're right now in that peak period when it happens. Philippines is every year ravaged along the coast, and I was in Hong Kong and in Shenzhen, so in China and mainland and Hong Kong last week. And we the debate during this was IHIF Asia, the conference, and they call everyone's checking on apps, as you do this time of year.
Hmm.
Will it hit? Will you make your flight? Now that one uh, slowed down. This one that is sitting right now did not slow down.
Yeah.
Today, everyone's been circulating pictures of the bulletin up in Ocean Park and like floods and gates and just lobbies flooded with water. And yeah, it this one hit big. And
Hmm.
there's when the discussion is, will this hit Hanoi? Then it's bad because that is unusual. Hanoi is more, inland and stuff, and
Yeah.
that's unusual. So it's definitely a theme that impacts hotels and tourism every year. But this, we're in the middle of quite a big theme right now.
The interesting thing, I mean, obviously, yeah, we get our own version of this, especially in the Southeast U.S. and
Yeah,
the Caribbean.
100%.
But the fact that you're at an actual, business event in an impacted region at the time, like I can't imagine somebody planning a sizable event in, the Bahamas at this time of the year because everybody understands it's hurricane
No,
season,
it's a good point, right? Why, but business goes on, and I think there is a difference around that, and it's also the way people look at it and how hotels and how investors look at it, because it's not like, say, the Mediterranean, where we have seasonal closing here because it's a summer resort or something. Here, it is more rare here, and you look at it. Well, the cost of doing business, in a way,
Hmm.
and you have a lot of these markets. Like think about it, Q4 in Hong Kong and along that coastline is peak for
Yeah.
events business. And
Yeah.
that is October. And October is definitely, I mean, it should be more right now in September, but it can absolutely dip over. So people do it. Last week, the bigger event in town was the jewelry fair, which attracts
Hmm.
a lot of rich people, a lot of
Hmm.
traders around that. So the risk is there, but the events are there, and it's needed for hotels, particularly in Hong Kong. And because it's interesting when you look at, so if people are not familiar with this, like the GBA, the Greater Bay Area, is this region of future, which 100 million people. It's like Shenzhen is across the border from Hong Kong, and in the mid '90s you had 100,000 people tops, and now
Hmm.
it's close to 10 million. Shenzhen has traded places, become a huge city with tech and obviously all the manufacturing, universities, and really vibrant, a young demographic. It is the only of the tier one cities in China that is trading at kind of positive RevPAR numbers now driving, because they're gaining to some degree, not just of what I just said, but also the loss of Hong Kong, where it's more affordable. If you go across the border on the weekends, or anytime for an event, you go to Shenzhen. The train takes 13 minutes from Kowloon West to Fujian. 13 minutes, and it's a high-speed train. Um, so you head across the border, you have a great food, you do some shopping, you stay in a hotel, New St. Regis, whatever. So clearly that has an impact on retail, F&B, and hotels. So the
Hmm.
interesting dynamic that we don't see in many places around the world.
Yeah, I mean, because when I think of this travel to, hurricane prone regions in this part of the world, I think there is always this kind of class of traveler who is willing to assume a level of risk in order to kind of get a deal, you know, like if you travel to the Caribbean late
Yeah,
September, so like right when we're at now recording this,
right.
like, all right, I'm going to pay less than I would otherwise, but also there's always the
Hey,
significant chance, but it seems
yeah.
like it's set up differently over there.
What it is, like, and I think you'll have low season. It's the same. You go Southeast Asia, you go to Phuket in September, the likelihood of it raining very high, but you
Yeah.
pay less, and it's still a great destination. June, Maldives, low season, it rained, still a great destination.
Hmm.
December, January in Bali, they all have it. It's a lot of seasonality. I think obviously typhoons and things like that are a little bit bigger than just rainy season, but these markets need to operate. I mean, and some years it is more lenient. The flights aren't canceled and the city
Hmm.
operates. But now we had Hong Kong airport shut down, which impacts. But so that's interesting. I mean, Hong Kong, we talked a lot about Hong Kong last week. It's still, you'll ask some people, oh, the city's changed. Of course it's changed and what's happened now. But if you compare to where it is now in terms of hotel performance, and this is not a market that has had a lot of hotel supply. We're seeing some
Hmm.
new boutiques and some other things, but generally, I mean, for a while they had negative supply when hotels shut down. But they are about 5% behind in occupancy and 12% behind in rate compared to the peak year, which was 2018. This takes time, and they have been growing, and our forecast for it is, low and slow. There's no big train picking this up quickly. But there are some, I mean, when I was there, the new Kimpton opened just across from the region. So there are some openings. But it's still a market that people like. They have a
Hmm.
new venue for events and stuff. That's going to be interesting to see how that pans out.
So, what were your actual takeaways from the event itself?
I think when people ask me as well when I was doing like the main presentation is around what are we looking here, and the main takeaway that I was trying to communicate was the reality check, and there is definitely an investment interest because in pockets it's not we're not saying that there's tons of distressed assets and stuff, but there's definitely things are changing flags,
Hmm.
assets that are coming up either to the end of it or that make more sense in a different brand. It is hyper competitive between the brands. We talked about this before across the wider region. There's no change in what people say on panels. Oh, the hot markets are still XYZ. So in Japan, Australia, etc., Singapore, and Vietnam. Um, as these markets and India as they develop. But people are very keen to get in, not at any price. But there's definitely still an appetite because the owners are looking to either rejig the portfolios that they have or they're changing the brands that they see. It's just really competitive between that, while white label continues to grow, and
Hmm.
that's all true as well. So I think there were some good conversations around that and some other bits.
Hmm.
And and I mean, I talk more about Korea now than I've done in the last few months. I bet people want more about that. We have new brands coming in, the new hotels. It's a lot of high end product that's going in. They've grown remarkably in rates in the last few years. It's both domestic. It still has the same fundamentals that we mentioned before, from before in terms of the financing and could be volatile and arrivals, but it has moved. So people are keen to do things in Korea around the country. Obviously, not just Jeju and Seoul and Incheon, around the country. So yeah, it's an interesting market to follow a little bit more into 26, and the growth is always going to slow down there as well.
Hmm. So, speaking of events, you guys got a big one coming up in what, a week and change
Mm.
in Singapore. So, what are your expectations for F1 this year?
Well, my expectation is that I mean it's hard to go higher because Boylando won last year,
Hmm.
um, and Max second and Piastri. It was a fun race last year, like and stuff. So we're hoping for a good race. When I was getting home from the office today, it's all up and it's nice. We're being fenced in again. It's an excitement, over 300,000 people over the weekend. Yeah, so we're obviously talking to a lot of media around it. The
Mhm.
pace of the city and how it books up, I mean, it remains a popular event. We compare it how the city is performing as an F1 destination compared to other ones, and it does well. It does really well, and this is a high compression market anyway, right? Over 80% and high rates. The pace compared to last year was more normal. Last year it was more last minute, which meant less ability to yield. This year we have seen nice, normal, steady pace, 20% ahead 4 weeks before the event of where the books were last year. And on the actual race week and race weekend, it's like 5-10 percentage points in occupancy already ahead of last year because of that. I think that normally evens out in the end, but it could mean that particularly either trackside that they are able to yield higher rates. We have a number of new hotels since last year and 2 years ago that are could want to steal share that don't pay the track levy because if you're on the track side, you pay a levy to government here as a hotel, and if you're say up on Orchard, you don't. You have a different competitive pattern. So I think it'll end up a good hotel performance for the hotels. The interesting is going to be if retail and F&B has spent the same way, which we won't know for a while. Because leading into this, that the markets around Singapore have done pretty normal. Sentosa has been a little bit down, but otherwise it's pretty normal. And I mean, we can celebrate that National Day a month ago, had a big rate spike that we haven't really seen before. But coming into the F1, I think we'll have a good hotel performance race, and then we'll enjoy Foo Fighters and Smashing Pumpkins.
I was going to say, are you feeling any more or less optimistic about the entertainment side of it?
No, I feel good about at least that. I mean, and listen, that's my bias. Obviously, I know there's a lot of kids who will watch the G Dragon and K-pop and other bits, and some geriatrics incorporated who will enjoy Elton John, but that's not me. But that's okay.
Listen, it's both ends of the spectrum, right? It's something for everybody.
Music, and live music is never bad. It's good. So it's going to be amazing. Really looking forward to it.
I will say, I will push back on that statement. I've seen enough live music to know that it is sometimes not good.
You know what? You are probably right. The problem is I've lived for a long time in a country where I'm not going to say we're starved because it's so much better these days. But whenever I go, it's New York or London, it's a different offering in terms of concerts and culture. That is true. So we're doing a lot better here now. It's great, but yeah, I'm a little bit starved. Right.
So, any other interesting takes for this month? Any outlook on the industry stuff? Anything that
I think one of the main points actually we talked about was F&B, because even if when we look ahead, people are always talking about the forecast. Where are we now? But the F&B was a big topic because we tracked and looked and said, what's the ratio to sales in hotels? And we go country by country and market and say, because between say 2010 and up to COVID, there was this move. There was a lot of brands and hotels from, we could go above upper mid-scale with these select service, but in upscale and above, like more F&B, like getting that right, the all day dining. And for that decade, the ratio to sales moved so much more into F&B and how RevPAR is one thing. Yes, never mind. But what about my venue and banqueting, but also the F&B in my 6 outlets? Mm-hmm. And that has completely changed. Like in the last 5-6 years, and coming out of this, we've seen the ratio to sales just move straight back. In we talked about Phuket earlier, 5%. In mainland China, combining all hotels, it's like changed from 39% to 32%, I think, the ratio to sales to F&B. So it's moving away. If you sit with a lot of risk on your hands, that risk is having on your balance sheet in-house F&B outlets. It's hard to make money in F&B. The Chinese example that we talked about, I mean, it's not just that revenue is down, and that's in restaurants, it's banquet and venue, but it's the expenses compared to like the rooms division around it, wages, staff benefits. The scary number that I put up was that for in China, restaurant GOP in hotels is down 24% year to date versus last year. That's a huge number. And it's particularly big in Beijing and some of those markets where it's really tight and hard to run F&B in hotels. So I think there's an interesting conversation. I met one developer that is opening a new hotel in Suzhou that with zero F&B, like zero, no
Hmm.
breakfast, nothing. So I think that was a big takeaway and a big topic. So if you forecast and just look at the RevPAR, that's one thing. Like this, we make the statement now. Listen, our forecast for the rest of the year for combining these 16 markets as kind of a snapshot, it's flat 25. Next year, 2.5% plus. But what is the impact on your bottom line? What is your GOP forecast for next year? And I mean, that's the difference. That depends really on your exposure, I would say, to F&B and the venues and the MICE business and how that comes back.
I mean, there's so many layers to that too, right? Like, I mean, any hotel business like struggles because I mean, if you do it right, essentially F&B is a almost separate business than the
It's
hotel
amazing.
business entirely.
If you do it right, it's great. And listen, there are people, I totally agree with it. It sounds like I'm just saying, it's like, oh, get rid of all of it. But clearly, there are hotels where you have the brand, where it's part of the brand experience. And that
Hmm.
sounds like I went for a brand of it, where that fits well. And there's obviously people who can do F&B so supremely well that it drives the whole bottom line. That's great. But at a macro level, there are more that are struggling than not. And I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah,
because
for
of
sure.
one end. So there's definitely a bit of opening in there for sure.
And it's hard to replicate. Like it's when you look at the
Yeah.
companies that do it well, it's hard to just say, well, do what they do. Because you look at like, I mean, Kimpton is obviously well known for their strong handling of F&B, but their idea is always we got to build a restaurant that the person who lives down the street wants to eat at, right? And if you're a hotel in an international market that's dependent on international demand and all that, like you're catering to two separate audience if it's an international traveler and also the local down the street, like, and you don't even really know who your core consumer is. That's a hard business to run.
It is. And I mean, if you take out those people, say like Nobu, right? So I was also managing a panel on branded residents in Thailand last weekend with and Nobu, Nobu starts as a high-end restaurant, and then they do branded residents and hotels out of that. If you start from that, you're pretty good at that first component, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's, but I think there's a lot of people who did what you just said and said, like, let's do some of that. And that's not going
Hmm.
to cut it. That's not going to cut it.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So obviously stateside, we've in the last few months, there's been a lot of kind of hemming and hawing about the trajectory of the last few bits of the year. Forecast wise, Q4, what are your broad expectations?
Yeah, I think the Q4 is the quarter where we look to see an adjustment in two directions. In the markets that maybe struggle a bit more than we thought, like Thailand, that that will regulate and correct itself so that it ends not as bad as it looks midway through the year. And then your market like Japan, where it corrects in the other direction, where the growth slows down.
Hmm.
So you have like counter moving parts, but again, on a broad scale means that macro level it ends flat, and into 26 we're seeing low and slow growth, and you can call it stability because it is low stability, and that's set against we still have another year with less new supply before 27, 28 when that new pipeline is ready across the region, and also productivity has probably never been sharper, right? People have been forced to do it, but it's there. To weigh those up against each other, it is there. It's tight. Like the rest of the world, like the growth numbers are low pretty much everywhere,
Yeah.
and the same is in APAC now. So the people who know their stuff as as
Yeah.
and in certain markets are in for a better ride.
Yeah, I mean the bright spots across the globe are obviously few and far between, and some of them are so specific. It's like, what do you take
Yeah.
away from Canada having amazing domestic travel right now? That's not something that like that's not a trend that's going to flow through anywhere else, you know.
No, 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 no. And you're right. And those are going to pop up. And I mean, we have markets that were stable for a long time before, remain stable. You're Australia,
Mhm.
the Maldives, whatever. And that, what's interesting still is that trend that we can talk about more next time, and just that we said earlier, like India, but it's across region. What will it mean when we have this this broadening, this maturity on second, third, fourth tier cities in these markets when they get these services and new brands, etc. It's good for the future, right? But that it's not a clear linear balance growth.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said about that, but it's interesting.
All right. So before we wrap up, we're going to get this podcast out just in time ahead of the weekend
Ooh,
before the grand final in the
that's right.
AFL. So we've got Brisbane Lions, we've got Geelong Cats, an all
Mm.
feline grand final. I did, as somebody who's relatively new to the sport, I did really appreciate that the last round was both the games were bird versus cat, and cat triumphed as you would expect.
Of course you looked at that. Of course you looked at that. That's
um,
funny.
so what's your expectations for the last game of the
Well,
season?
listen, it's for Singapore, it's a good time. It's 12:30. It's a noon game here in my time zone. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And as much as I would like to say that something against our dear friend Matthew, I gotta say, the more I look at the squad and how they played and how they're peaking this, I can't say anything else than the Lions. And I got to go with the Brazil. I clearly impressed. It's been a wonderful playoff. So many
Mhm.
great quarters of footy that I watched on flights back and forth around.
Yeah,
I have to say the Lions for me looked like the winner. And if I were a betting man, I would save them to win with maybe 3-4 goals or something. That feels like
what did
that's
you
some words that I'm going to eat up. Maybe.
this is not related to either of those two teams. So what did you make of the Crows collapse? I know earlier in the season our friend Matthew in Australia did say they were a bit of paper tigers, and that looked like a foolish statement at one point, but man, they really felt like they just ran out of gas. Maybe for off the pitch reasons, but it really felt like that team just had its soul sucked out of it, despite looking like a behemoth just a couple weeks earlier.
It was tough, but I think you're right. There was just when you think it looks like they were they're gonna be able to put a really good run in there, but I yeah it's a podcast in itself to go through what it was, but there was a lot of stuff there.
Yeah.
What did they lose that last one? It's like over 30 points to the Hawks, right? That was pretty bad.
Yeah,
Uh,
it was one of those like
yeah,
it felt like the team was done. Like not that they gave up on their season, but like you can tell in any sport when a team just has truly run out of gas. And it was one of those like even like if I can't remember what the actual score was, but even if it was a 30-point loss, it felt like bigger than that. Like they were never in it type of loss, you know.
yeah.
But
I
anyway.
think by now I think Matthew, not our Matthew, the coach of the Knicks, has done some soul searching and what it is. But otherwise, my big takeaway from us was also to see Suns, and even if they lost big to Lions uh, before this, but how they got that last goal with the
Mhm.
only guy with the remaining like since they started. I think the Gold Coast Suns had a phenomenal season coming into the finals.
Definitely the fun
First
team
time
to root for. Yeah.
it was, and how can I not half root for them when Zach, our colleague Paul Hammond's beautiful son, who's a massive heart and battling in hospital in Brisbane. So shout out to Zach and the Gold Coast Suns for sure. They had a good season, and yeah, it's amazing.
I
Number
will
seven.
say I'm my anybody who's listening to this can totally question my expertise. I'm pushing my chips on Geelong on this one. I feel like it feels
Good,
like that's
good.
just the
There we
way it's
go.
moving. So we got some
Okay, give
conflict.
us a spread. Okay, I said 4 goals to Lions. Maybe three and a behind. What's your spread there? We're pretending we're Vegas people.
Um I'm gonna say it's a close one. I'm gonna say it's like really like a one goal game. It's gonna come right down to it. Like I
Beautiful.
want this to be like an all-timer finish, like a really exciting, like
Love it.
right down to the last like horde type of thing.
Amazing. Let's go. I look forward to checking that out, and good luck to all of us.
And before we sign off, speaking of betting, I asked Natalie Harms, our resident F1 expert on our team, because I am certainly not that. I asked her for her F1 takes. She says the smart money is on McLaren to bring home the championship this weekend.
That's for me after the last 3 races. Yeah, because Red Bull's got a bullet right now, and even if Max is lethal and made that mistake last week, I now not with my heart, but with my head, I would say Max for another win then.
Well, we will see. We will see. Yeah. We're staking our claims today.
That's right. That's right. Well, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jesper.
Hi, I'm Davon Reed.
I'm Omari Head.
And I'm Chris Henry.
We're the hosts of the Next Gen and Lodging podcast. It's a monthly show in which we interview a new generation of hoteliers to get their insights into a variety of disciplines and topics, from finance to food and beverage and hotel operations. Listen to us on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode of the CoStar News Hotels podcast was recorded on September 24th, 2025, and edited by me, Sean McCracken. Visit costar.com/hotel news for more.